for coming. So Adam was right. I'm going to read from The Grip of It, the new novel, and all you need to know is that it's about a young couple who has had some trouble. The husband has a gambling problem, and so they've sort of decided to move out of the city and try their hand at a more rural life by buying a new house and stepping away from all their regular trappings. So the only other thing I think you need to know is that the narrators alternate in the book. So some of the chapters come from James, the husband's perspective, and some come from Julie, and I will let you know when that's shifting. And the prologue is from James. Maybe we move in and we don't hear the intonation for a few days. Maybe we hear it as soon as we unlock the door. Maybe we drag our friends and family into the house and ask them to hear it, and they look into the distance and listen as we try to describe it and fail. You don't hear it? It's like a mouth harp, deep twang, like throat singing, ancient, glottal, resonant, husky and rasping, but underwater. Alone in the house, though, we become less aware of it, like a persistent, dull headache, deaf to the sound until the still silence of ownership settles over us. Maybe we decide we will try to like the noise. Maybe we find comfort in it. Maybe an idea insists itself more easily than an action. Maybe we make eye contact with the elderly neighbor next door. He watches through his window. The moving truck pulls up. We freeze on that odd instant. Maybe Julie's foot breaks through a plank on the front porch when she steps outside to phone her father to let him know we've arrived safely. Maybe the board breaks months later while we're enjoying the weather with a glass of lemonade. Maybe we fix it right away. Maybe we ignore it for a few months. Maybe we try to convince ourselves that we should get settled before worrying about any repairs. Maybe I make one of the hidden basement rooms into my dark room. Maybe I start taking photographs of everything, of the stain on the wall and of Julie putting away the mismatched dishes in the cupboard and of the neighbor emerging onto his front porch and retreating almost immediately. Maybe the neighborhood children ring the doorbell. Maybe it's some faulty wiring. Maybe that faint chiming is something else entirely, a thing we will only recognize later. Maybe something as simple as a doorbell deserves our dread occasionally. Maybe we're foolish to stay calm for as long as we do. Maybe I hear a sound and Julie doesn't. Maybe sometimes Julie cocks her ear and says, "What was that?" And I haven't heard a thing. Maybe it's possible to become deaf to something, to block it out. Maybe it's not there for both of us to hear at the same time. Maybe we should remember our fear of the undercurrent when we go to the beach. Maybe we should stay inside and tell each other stories that are further from the truth. Maybe we should share something genuine for once, stories from the deep, honest pits of us. But what if those buried, fetid stories are the ones that have bubbled to the surface? What if they're right there, balanced on the edge of our teeth, ready to trip into the world without even our permission? And then the first chapter is from Julie. The real estate agent with his waxy hair and perma-smile keeps stopping to listen, waving his hand, saying, "That's just the house settling." We think the house seems more than settled and wonder why he's calling so much attention to the sound, and look at the handsome dark wood trim and how many closets are hidden within closets. And we stare out the picture window at the woods butted up against the backyard, and we probably wouldn't have heard a thing if he hadn't mentioned it. But we do hear a noise, and now that we're listening, it is unsettling how much it sounds like moaning, but not the bellow of someone in pain, more like an incantation, some sort of ritual snarl. So we look at each bedroom carefully, hoping to be proven wrong about this place, hoping to find something that convinces us this house is not, in fact, exactly what we've been seeking. And we ask the agent if we have to worry about crime living so near the woods, and he explains that the woods are bounded on the other side by a beach, and there is nothing to be afraid of but waves. And we smile politely, but in our minds we think a wave can overwhelm and a wave can take away. We snag on that, but the agent barrels forward, hustling us to the unfinished basement and pretending not to hear the sound in an obvious way. And he disappears around a corner, and we follow him only to find him gone. James and I look at each other, concerned, until a section of the wall spins around, and there stands the agent, face plain, matter of fact, saying, "Secret compartments. There are several of them in this room alone." He emerges and squats down, lifting up a 3x3 section of flooring to reveal a small, finished crawl space below us, an empty concrete cube. And he reaches above his head and punches up a drop tile to expose another pocket above, lit well, plaster painted a clean, pale blue. And then I reach high above my head, trying to push against other tiles, but they all stick firmly in place. "Why?" I ask. "Well, the previous owner seems to have been a bit of a homebody," he says. "We're not sure of the original purpose of the rooms, but they do make for a ton of extra storage space." I squeeze James's hand and he squeezes back because we have this way of feeling the same about the unexpected. And I know, like me, he's excited about the secret passages, this being one of the places where we are seen together, just one instance where we twist in the same spot, mirroring each other and meshing at once. A stain stammers on one of the walls, a wet grayish blotch like new paper mache edged in black, and I ask the agent about it, and he says, "Water damage from a leak at the top of the foundation, but it's been fixed." Another crush of our hands together, and we wind our way back up the stairs. The agent asks what we think. We don't actually need time to decide, but James is doing a great job of remembering my instructions. We will not act too eager. We will hide our excitement until we are alone and can take our time to discuss with reason and measure. We'll think about it, I say. But we'll let you know soon. We know how quickly a place like this can disappear. So they move into the house. They both find jobs in the city. Julie takes a job, in the new town that they've moved to. Julie takes a job at a company where a former college classmate of hers works. So she has a lifeline in the city, and James is a little more unmoored. And they have this neighbor that's kind of watching them through his window, keeping an eye on them. And I think that's all you need to know for chapter 6, which comes from James. I grab a beer with my coworker Sam on my way home from work. He's not a friend I would pick on my own. In the economy of work compatriots, though, he will do. We drive separately to the bar closest to the industrial park that our office hides inside. "Stellar to have you on board, man. Right after I got hired, they appointed a female CEO, and she's hired only women since. I thought I was going to have to file a discrimination suit. Where are my bros at, you know? I mean, the office has some nice scenery now, but I want someone to enjoy it with." He chucks my arm a little too hard. I battle with whether I'll share his worldview with Julie when I get home. Is the commiseration worth turning her against my one friend in this town? We take turns buying around each, and then Sam says he has to get home to watch the game. I compliment his choice of teams. They're doing well this season, and I'd have bet on them if I hadn't promised Julie I'd stop. He high-fives me and punches my arm again. I will myself not to flinch. Sam checks his reflection in a Bud Light mirror. He pinches his goatee to no noticeable effect and straightens the collar of his polo. "Later, man. Hasta mañana." He heads for the door. I order one more. The old bartender, who'd been silent until now, tells me my face is new. "Where are you from?" he says without much interest. He reaches across the bar to wipe down the area where Sam was sitting. I notice the wrong way the last joints of his fingers bend. "We're from the city. We moved into the big house at the end of Stillwater." He looks up sharply. "The end of Stillwater, you say? With the wraparound porch?" "Yeah." "Well, they've all got wraparound porches up there, so you're not helping me much, but you're saying the last one before the woods. Is that right?" "That's the one." I take a sip. "Why?" "I know a bit about that house. Do you?" I pause. "I know I live there. What else do I need to know?" "A family lived in that house for a long time. Parents and a handful of kids, little slices of people they were, pale, fuzzy. But what about them?" He runs his thumb inside the waistline of his jeans, inching up the flesh of his belly behind his thin t-shirt and then letting it fall. Well, the boy child was seen so little, people wondered if he was real. Shined like a shaded bulb, if you know what I mean. Now, the girl I knew a bit because my buddy dated her back in high school. She had troubles. My friend was never allowed in the house, but he was enamored for a short while until her father told him not to come near her anymore. I ask the bartender for more pretzels. He refills the bowl with a warning. Careful, those suckers will only make you thirstier, and then you'll be wobbling your car home like the road is a tightrope. No reason to reveal the trade secrets, I say. I'll take a glass of water, too. The bartender fills a pint glass for me. Now, the girl had a habit. When they were out, she'd keep scribbling in a notebook or on a napkin or any little scrap of paper she could dig up. My buddy said he didn't even think she knew what she was writing most of the time. She'd fill up a piece of paper and then flip it around, start writing the other way, layers. He said he'd wonder if she was listening to him when he talked, but she could carry on a full conversation while she wrote. I'd say he was a little relieved when her father forbade him from coming around. He wanted to understand, and he was getting the idea he couldn't. So what happened to her? I catch sight of the clock in the mirror behind the bar. I realize I should get going. She ran away from home not long after that. Her parents died, and then the state tried to track her down but couldn't, so they ended up putting the house on the market. I asked for the tab. I thank him. I'll be back in case you think of any more stories. The bartender looks at me as if I've misunderstood. I drive on the 4-lane highway until the heavy trees thin and side streets offer themselves. I look for kids running around after dinner. I hunt for the lights of TVs and windows, but still the neighborhood is silent. It's later than I think, I tell myself. You wanted quiet. This is what you wanted. And this chapter from Julie. At work, people are polite when they ask about the house and how unpacking is going, and I tell myself they don't resent that I was hired as VP of product, even though they've all been here longer and know the business better than I do. I tell stories about finding more secret places in the house and how floorboards shift and we find the blank treasure that is more storage, and about how the humidity swells the windows in their frames and how the glass makes the forest waiting behind the house seem wet and close. And I say we think our neighbor might be spying on us, and they laugh about what they think is my paranoia. I say, I'll have all of you over soon so you can see for yourselves. And fine, don't believe me. And women and men alike huddle at the entrance to my cube to make easy jokes until the day Connie asks what's on my neck. And I don't know the answer, so she comes over and smooths the wispy hairs up and tugs my collar down and says, "This bruise, what happened?" The two of us rush to the bathroom down the hall, and I turn my back to the mirror but also crane my neck to try to see what she's talking about. And when I yank at my collar, I realize the area is tender, but the angle is all wrong, and I can't see. Connie runs to get the compact from her purse, and it takes me a few tries to get the orientation of reflections right, but there it is, a bruise, large and oddly shaped, and we can't see the bottom of it, so we shut the bathroom door and lock it. And because Connie is such an old friend with whom I used to change in dance class, and because it doesn't matter, I take my shirt off and the bruise is even larger than we thought, running almost down to my waist. Connie asks what happened, and I say, I don't know. And she gives me that stern look that says both, you can tell me, and for real, we're gonna fall into this cliche. I say, Connie, really, I'm freaked out right now, and a million things flash through my mind, but mostly it's those books I read as a preteen. 6 Months to Live, I Want to Live, Too Young to Die. Cancer, I say out loud. It's some sort of blood cancer. Connie immediately sobers up. Come on, Julie, let's not be dramatic. And when I look at her with real fear in my eyes, she pulls me to her, and she's so bony I don't expect her hug to be as comforting as it is, but I can tell she's watching my back in the mirror and trying not to grab at the bruise because she'd seen me flinch when I pulled my shirt off. Did you get wasted and fall down again, she asks, smiling into my hair, knowing I've pulled myself together since school. And I can't help but laugh, because even if Connie is not my best friend, it turns out she's exactly who I want in this bathroom with me. She's all I've got in this tiny new town, and she's still hugging me, but I'm trying to break free to put my shirt back on, and she won't let go, and it's some kind of joke I don't get, and that's why I love her, because she can make me laugh in a nonsense way, and she says in a spooky voice, I think it's growing. And I laugh and give her one final push. So comforting, Con. She squints her eyes at my reflection as if she might actually be noticing something, but I pull my shirt down and her eyes snap back to mine and she says, "Yeah, I'm kidding. Couldn't be." And one more tiny little chapter from James. At night, on the way to the bathroom, I don't turn the hall light on. I trace my hand along the wall. I touch something wet and soft. It reminds me of rotten apple flesh. I think of Julie's bruise. I run my hand back. I try to find the spot, but I can't. My senses weren't awake. Maybe my fingertips imagined it. I massage my hands with each other to wake them up. At the bathroom, I flip on the light. I can feel my heartbeat in my eyes. My vision pulses slightly. I stare at the tiles behind the toilet. In the mirror, a darker version of myself follows directly behind me. No matter which way I turn, it's turning immediately before me. I feel a furry smoke spreading its way up my arms. I don't let myself think. I return to our room. Julie shifts when I get back into bed. Shadows caw outside our window. But I know what a shadow is. Thanks.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm going to describe the grip of it and ask you to respond.
Okay.
The Grip of It is a narrow, clenched, haunted house novel about a married couple cursed by their own dishonesty to each other.
You want me to agree or disagree and explain, or
Something
what?
like that, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's mostly right, though I would say that attributing what happens to only their dishonesty with this is better, right? To only their dishonesty with each other is maybe simplifying a little bit, or if it is all related to dishonesty, then a lot of the dishonesty that happens is unintentional and just sort of a lie of omission or of misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the things about this book that I admire the most, which is that it's really balanced, and there's like a plausible explanation for everything that happens that depends on like the socioeconomics of wanting a house and buying one and the sort of psychological balance of a marriage. But then also there's this other haunted house narrative happening simultaneously. And everything has like a plausible, credible explanation that the characters are trying to act on while they are simultaneously being haunted. So it's like you had to come up with like 2 or 3 sets of explanations for every single thing that happens in the book. There's like 3 books inside the book. And so any way you try to describe the book, there's always like 2 or 3 other things that you're like necessarily leaving out. Can you talk about what it's like to write a book in which there are always like 2 or 3 things happening simultaneously and sustaining each other and lending mystery to each other?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that doesn't happen on the first draft. You know, like the first draft ends up being just kind of amassing all of these things that happen and like a certain mood, maybe a tone, and then in revision, does the stress testing happen to try and make sure that all of those different registers of resonance match up, or at least many of them do, because everything can't be read in 3 ways, but much of it can be read in a number of different ways. Yeah, and so I mean, when I'm writing a first draft, I know, I can sort of see what's directly in front of me, and, when I started writing this, I knew that I was writing a haunted house, but I didn't know what I wanted to say about how a haunted house narrative could be used to explain something else. That came just after kind of seeing what the story gave back to me. So, I mean, I don't write toward a theme or toward like a larger message, at least not in that first draft. I revise for that. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. The book mobilizes all these like seemingly classic horror maneuvers, but the more I thought about them, the more I thought in some way you had invented them, or at least invented like the particular way that they're working. Like there's the writing on the walls of the house, the like drawings of figures on the house. there is the creepy neighbor old man who is both not there and there. I don't even, like, when one is revising a novel, like each new draft, like to some extent erases the memory of what happened in the last draft, but how much fiddling around with the old guy next door did you have to do to get that balance right?
A lot, and he used to be a narrator too. There were drafts when, so right now in this version of the book, we only get the story from James's perspective and Julie's perspective, and they contradict each other, but there was a third contradiction at one time that was the narrator and the narrator knowing quite concretely what the history of the house was. And so he was maybe the element that got most pulled out of the story. You know, he's still there, but we don't hear from him. We're not getting his version of the story, and I think that helped to kind of destabilize the way that we understand James and Julie's interpretation of events too. Yeah.
I think that there's sort of like no way to emphasize enough to students how much of writing a big project happens in revision and how much of it you just had no idea you were ever going to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talk about like taking a narrator out of the book, and the book that I'm writing now, you know, after I had like many hundreds of pages, I decided to pull out the person who narrated the entire book, and take what had been like in first person, like in third person, from a bunch of different points of view. So much of the process of writing is like taking what you have and finding like a different way to repurpose it. How many of the really great things that happen in the book sort of matured through that kind of process? I'm talking about like the drawings on the wall. At one point, the drawings show up on someone else's wall when James and Julie spend time in someone else's apartment. There's the bruises. Like, how did the bruises evolve? And what are they? Can you sell out what they are? Do you know what they are?
No, I don't think I can. Well, I have my theories about what they are, but people think that I'm lying when I say this, like, because a lot of people ask, "Can you explain this part of the book?" And I can explain my theory on certain parts of the book, but I mean, I truly believe, and this isn't just like me paying lip service to the writer-reader contract, I truly believe, like, once the book goes out there, it's whatever the reader makes of it. So whatever you decide the solution to the mystery is, you know, whichever one of those threads of explanation you decide is right, that's yours. I mean, the bruises, I think, came from, I mean, I bruised easily as a child, and I was always convinced something was happening, like what Julie says in that chapter about thinking about that. Did anyone else read these Lurleen McDaniel books when they were younger? I'm sure that they're not really around anymore, though maybe they're lingering in libraries somewhere. But there's this whole series of books that's just teenage girls learning they have cancer, and sometimes they make it and sometimes they don't. It's awful, but I was obsessed with them. I think the bruises tie back to that, and I think I knew, thinking about the way that the drawings show up in different places and the way that nature is involved in the story, I knew from the beginning that I wanted to write a haunting. I like a house as a location for haunting because it allows you to engage with the domestic, but I also knew that I wanted the haunting to extend beyond the house and also like into the bodies of the characters in the book as well, because I wanted to subvert the reader's expectations with that. I wanted to stretch it beyond that to make it not seem that, you know, it's as simple as just leaving the house, because that's always what people say with a haunted house story, right? Why don't you just leave? But I didn't want that pat recommendation for solving the problem to be an answer, to be a plausible excuse or answer.
Yeah, it does seem by the time the haunting really sets in, it's too late to leave the house. It's like a haunting of the people. This is a slightly different way to approach the book. James and Julie are really agreeable people. I thought that they seemed like nice, sort of normal people in a way. And there's a way in which the book sometimes equates their agreeability with denial.
Yeah.
Like if they were less agreeable, if they fought more, they might not be in this position. Can you talk about their agreeability and the problem of denial in the book, in their marriage?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think maybe this is evidence that I am not that dissimilar from James or Julie. But though I do think, don't get me wrong, I have a temper. But it's almost like it's not denial so much in my mind as is like they start to distrust themselves at a certain point, and they're not sure what to believe. It's not even that they are so hesitant to trust that it could be a haunting, that it could be ghosts in the house. So they look for other ways of explaining it because they're trying to be logical, and so it's less that they're and then I guess I'm sorry, I'm stumbling through this. And so then in thinking about the problems that happen in their marriage too, I think maybe they're both of the mind that it's like, this person has faults, but like they're my person, and so like we'll figure out a way through it, and that works to a certain point in the book, and then it starts to sort of break down when everything else is breaking down in the book as well. So, I mean, that goes with that idea of what my interpretation of the book's events are. I don't see it as denial so much as this, like, maybe misguided urge to just work through problems and not just run away from them.
Mm-hmm. There's this amazing passage when James, who's the pseudo-recovered gambling addict, seems to figure out in conversation with someone else that he gambled in order to see what it felt like to lose.
Yeah.
I did a little reading around on gambling on the internet when I read that, because I'm like not a gambler at all, but I'm interested in like sort of like addictive pathology. And Bataille says, I learned, that people gamble in order to lose, and that they don't gamble to win because there actually is no way to win. So you gamble repetitively to sort of persist in the direction of losing, which seemed like a really great, elegant understanding of how addiction works. Like you're an addict when you're a smoker when smoking makes you feel like crap and you do it anyway.
Yeah.
How did you decide to make gambling his issue? Did that start just because you were trying to create like a unique person with a unique thing, or did you have like some other thing in mind? Like how did you come to that decision?
I mean, I knew that I figured out that something had to be broken in their marriage before they decide to do this, that kind of forces them into that decision, that change in their lives. The reason for a gambling addiction was actually because, this is very random, I'd been listening to this podcast with Norm Macdonald, who is a gambling addict, a comedian and a gambling addict, if you're not familiar with Norm Macdonald. And he talks about gambling in this way that he said, I guess he's lost his fortune multiple times, like millions of dollars multiple times. And the person who was interviewing him said, why do you do it? Like, once you've done it once, how could you do that again? And he said, after you've gambled away most of the money, the rest of the money that's there just reminds you of everything else you've lost, so you might as well get rid of that too and just start from scratch. And that description of gambling, I don't know, I don't think I'd ever thought about why a person gambles or how they could gamble so far that they would lose everything that they have, especially if they start with a lot. And there was something about that I just kept thinking about it. I think I listened to this podcast years before I made James a gambling addict, but it had stuck in my mind. So when I was thinking of some fault to give him, that's what showed up.
That's totally amazing that he thought that. There's this weird thing that's innate in people, and if you put him in if you let him bet on a football game when they're 12, then they'll gamble away the house, That's amazing. The house in the book is frequently transforming. the woods around the house are also frequently changing to the point where there's this like droll thing that happens near the end of the book, which is that someone says, the trees are closer today, or something like that, right? Like the forest is closer to the house today than it was yesterday. Do you like own a house, or have you like seen someone go crazy in relation to owning a house?
No, I'm a renter. I think I'd like to own a house someday, maybe, if I can. And I've never really lived in a very rural environment either. So maybe that's part of it. It's some dread, it's some fear of home ownership, of that responsibility, or some fear of the natural world being very close by because I'm used to a more urban life. I don't know.
Here's a true story about my brother's house in the Chicago neighborhood of Andersonville. It's a new construction. Right after they moved in, his wife started getting headaches. Everyone said that his wife was crazy. They had the builder come back. They took down a wall. There was a leak in the wall and black mold over the entire inside of the house. And they had to tear down the house and remove all the black mold. And they were in court for 2 years fighting over who was going to pay for it. And my brother eventually won.
What a nightmare.
Yeah, I kept thinking of that when I was reading the book, because there's like health issues in the book. And there's a way in which the book is going to be discussed as like a book about what it means to own a home and like the dream of owning a home. It's like a really, really amazing book about that.
Yeah, and the dream of home ownership has changed, right? Like with the, the real estate bubble and, the way that people think, I don't know, like it seems like this is a millennial trend that millennials aren't buying houses as much anymore. And I've read articles about how, actually if you buy a house, and then, sell it in your old age, or if you rent for your life but sell the money that you would put into keeping up a house, that it actually evens out. So I mean, like some skepticism around what it means to own a house and to put down some sort of roots. I don't know, maybe that's part of what I'm thinking about in the book too.
Yeah. Here's a question about horror as a genre. It has a long list in it. Movies in our time are like kind of getting more lame, except for horror movies, which are getting better. I'm talking about movies like Get Out, Raw, The Babadook, It Follows, Goodnight Mommy, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Under the Skin, The Invitation, and The Witch, which, and there are more, point to horror as a kind of last bastion for really cool stuff that you can do in a story. Why did you write a horror novel, and did you have any of this in mind, and like what made this happen?
I think I do like horror movies, specifically well-made horror movies like the ones you listed. I've seen more horror movies than I've read horror books, to be sure. I mean, when I started writing, I've always liked scary stuff. When I was a kid, I liked scary stories, and my parents were very lenient about what I watched on TV. Like I remember being like 5 and having, I had like a taped off of TV video cassette of The Nightmare on Elm Street, like where Johnny Depp gets eaten by a waterbed, I think. And I just watched that scene on loop over and over, like blood spraying around the room. And eventually, like my mom did take that tape away from me eventually, but I mean, I'd probably seen it 15 times already by the time she took it away from me, and then she probably looked in on me one day and realized what I was watching and thought, okay, maybe this is a little too much. So I don't know, I mean, I think it's just rooted in that. I wasn't thinking initially of horror as a way of joining a current trend or conversation when I started writing, honestly, though I think you're right, horror is having a moment right now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm happy about it because I love horror.
Yeah.
This is going to be, I don't know if this is the last question, but this is definitely an essential question. You're internet famous for this beloved list of rejections that you keep. And it's, as a writer who's been rejected many times, I think the list is like really magical. And it's all the more dear because Ferrer Strauss has published this book. And for those in the audience who may not know what that means, Farrar Straus is one of the very best publishers that we have in the English language. So but the list is ongoing. I mean, there are still like contemporary additions to the list. What made you start the list, and how do people react to it?
I started the list very soon after I got out of grad school, when I was starting to submit my work, and I started it because I wanted to make a website for myself. And at the time, I thought I needed some sort of content that people might check back, to check in with, that beyond just listing my successes. And I knew that I also, when I was talking to, when I'd see writer friends at the bar or something like that, it always felt a lot easier to talk about the rejection letters we received than like the good things that were happening, maybe because the rejections were much more frequent. But then it always felt kind of like awkward to say like, I got a piece accepted or something like that. So so I think it was something in that like nugget of emotion that it felt much more comfortable to be self-deprecating than it did to be self-promotional. So I did it essentially as self-promotion in the beginning, and then I kept up with it. And it's funny, it's like, I would say that it's had this kind of like sine wave of moments when I'm like, yeah, this is great, because people respond well to it. People always say like it's very encouraging to see that, you just have to like keep going through it, and it's kind of a numbers game. The more you submit, the more rejections you'll receive, but the more acceptances you'll receive. And you get more comfortable with getting those no's in the mail, to the point where I just assume everything is a no now. And sometimes I have to read an acceptance letter 3 times before I'm like, where does it say no? Oh, they took it. That's amazing. But I would say that like what you said about Farrar Straus putting the book out, like that gives me this feeling now a little bit that like it's extra embarrassing that places that magazines still don't want my work. I'm like, like it makes me think that that this is, forgive me, it makes me feel like maybe I don't belong to be at FSG. I don't deserve to be at FSG if I can't get into Granta, something like that. So I mean, but it's good. Like that's a good way to stay humble, I don't know, to be honest about what the process is, because, there are people that are just wildly successful, like Roxane Gay is incredible, and she still is like, why won't the New Yorker put my work out? Like she has a New York Times advice column, but she's like, but the New Yorker doesn't want my work, And so like it never goes away, right? That that kind of anxiety around what's working and what's not working. And so I'm committed to staying with it, even if it's more embarrassing than not sometimes. So I'll be signing in the back, and I'm happy to answer any more questions if you have them. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thanks, Dave.